Welcome to the How to Not Execute Your Strategy podcast. I'm your host, Tim Ojai. This series is dedicated to the biggest lessons learned from the people who own strategic execution, the senior leaders who live in the center of it. My guest today is Lisa Love. Lisa is the co-founder and co-CEO of Tanoshi. Tanoshi provides innovative computers to prepare all kids for a digital future, no matter their socioeconomic background. And you might even remember them from the time they were on Shark Tank in 2020 and successfully got an offer. Lisa comes with a host of accolades, from being named to the 100 Powerful Women of 2020 by Entrepreneur Magazine to making the Forbes Next 1000 list. And in 2022, Lisa was named one of the 20 most inspiring entrepreneurs by Inc. magazine. Listen now as we talk about the constant stress of being a startup and what it takes to adjust your execution to navigate it all. Let's get to it. Lisa, I'm so glad to be talking to you today. This podcast is going to be absolutely not only fun, but I have a feeling very interesting. It's good to see you.
Yeah, you too, definitely. I'm glad, you invited me, and I'm glad to be here.
Cool. So we're going to dive right in. But before we go into our first of two questions, I want to ask, just give the audience a little bit of a background on your company and kind of what it's doing now.
Yeah, so our company is called Tanoshi, and we, our whole mission, we're a mission-based company, and our whole mission is to prepare all kids for this digital future, especially targeting underserved and underrepresented communities. So we believe every child should have the basic educational tools to succeed in life, and in school, right? So that's where it all starts. And so we believe, like, even a computer, which is what we launched first back in 2018. So we said, hey, every child needs a computer, not just the affluent, and a computer that they can work and learn from home. I'm old, so I'm going to kind of date myself, but to me, it's just like, back in the day when we had textbooks. If you didn't have a textbook, then, you're going to be so far behind in school if you didn't have a textbook. Well, that's what it is today with computers. If you don't have a computer, you're just going to get so far behind. And so we believe every child should have at least, the basic educational tools such as a computer.
That's awesome. And you're a co-CEO of Tanoshi. And I mean, I was literally I think I texted you. I was at the gym and I'm, doing my cardio, and there's Shark Tank on, the running reruns. And I see you. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I remember this. So we'll get into the Shark Tank story in a minute and all that. But for those who are listening, get ready. This is going to be an interesting story. So let's start with the story, because that's, I really think, the most important part. So the question I have for you, and I give all the guests, is, tell me about a time where you had a strategy that you had to execute and it didn't go as planned. What happened?
Yeah. So, of course, I'm working at a startup, right? And there's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of things that you have to figure out. I'll just say one thing, that your team is critical for execution. But so a strategy that we had, which I don't know, I wouldn't say it was a failure per se. Like, I think that's a harsh term. I think it worked for the time being, but now we definitely have to pivot. But the strategy that I'm talking about is our sales strategy, and specifically our channel distribution strategy. So my background is I worked for a major wine online retailer for 11 years, and I built their Amazon business. So I took that skill set and I basically built our Amazon business. And 2 years, so we launched in 2018. So we've been on the market for almost 5 years actually now. And the first 2 years, since I had that Amazon background and that skill set, we're like, okay, that's kind of a no-brainer. Let's really focus on Amazon, and not just Amazon, but marketplaces in general, to sell our product. And so, like I said, I mean, that worked during that time, pre-COVID, pre all this other stuff, pre-economy, pre-recession. And so, the marketplace was great for us. And that's actually how we got, well, one of the, I think, ways that we got noticed by Shark Tank. And so, the first 2 years selling on Amazon, selling in marketplaces, that was, it worked for us. We built a lot of traction. We gained a lot of momentum. We gained a lot of awareness, but now it's a whole different story. So, before, of course, our strategy was, hey, let's get into all these marketplaces, especially Amazon. Now it's like, okay, let's take a step back and really figure out, okay, even right now, Amazon is our #1 selling channel, but it's a whole different ball game right now. And it's just very, very challenging. We don't have control, and it's really, really scary for, this big gorilla like Amazon to have so much control over our sales. And
So let me just clarify here, because I think this is critical. So what you're talking about is you had a path and the path got disrupted by outside forces. It wasn't you were like, you know what, we need to make a change, whatever. It was literally disruption came from outside and you had to respond to that. And that's been hard.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, like the pandemic, the economy, the whole consumer, the D2C, direct to consumer market right now has really flattened out. The whole supply chain, stuff that we have no control over, just really, we've been through a lot of challenges. And
so as you go through those challenges, is that something that you as a leadership team then figure out and you just implement yourselves? Do you hand it off to other people to go implement? How do you get it from aha moment to getting stuff done?
Yeah, so that's the beauty of a startup. Our leadership team is me and my colleague. So my other co-founder. We're the leadership team. And then we have, it's a very, very lean team.
Yep.
And then we have, folks, contractors, a few contractors, part-time folks that work with us. But yeah, Brad, who's the other co-founder, and I make all the decisions. So, we're in it. We're in the thick of it. So we see what's going on as far as, numbers, and even with our customers, we're hearing directly from them what's going on, what they want, what ticks them, what pisses them off, what makes them happy. So we're right there with them, as opposed to like a big corporation where you're like
multiple layers,
so many different layers, 5 levels down, and you're not really hearing what's going on directly from the people that are buying your product. So
does that make it harder then to execute, because you have so much clarity that it's hard to, as I say, as a great leader, you should be able to turn your back and know that stuff is still getting done? Or do you feel like you have to keep your hands in everything to make sure it's getting done?
Yeah, that is very challenging. You do have to keep your hands in almost everything. And that's why, it's divide and conquer. And then, like I said, we've got some people working with us, but both Brad and I are very hands-on. We definitely delegate when we can, but as a startup, you've got to think of the funds. You've got to think of a lot of stuff. So we are in the thick of it. We are very hands-on doing stuff ourselves. And it's definitely a mindset. Right.
And then are you teaching people how to execute strategy, or are you just trying to hire that talent? Or are you just trying to like break it down as simple as possible and just say, go do this checklist? How's your approach to helping people do what needs to be done in the way that you want it done?
It depends on their skill set. Thankfully, we've had even customer service. So we've had people working with us in customer service on a part-time basis since we launched. So they're familiar with the processes. So we can kind of let them handle things. It depends on their skill set, and I guess, who we hire and how seasoned they are. I've been working with my graphic designer for a while. I can basically just give her a spreadsheet and tell her, hey, do this. And then she can go do it. I mean, and that's just from working with her for over a year now. So it really just all depends. I think it's going to depend on, your talent and your funds, right? Especially with the startup. So how much can you pay someone? I mean, can you pay for a more seasoned, person? Or are you going to have to, kind of not pay as much, but then know mentally that you're going to have to like take some responsibility on.
That's amazing. It makes me, I want to kind of pull in a little bit of the Shark Tank experience, because that's also an outside force. I'm sure once you got connected to the Sharks, and it was Damon John who jumped in most, or who did you work with the most from that experience? And just give me that answer, and I got a part 2 follow-up.
Yeah, so I can't talk too much about the Shark Tank experience or get into the details, but yes, Damon John is who we received an offer from. And yeah, I mean, that was we never went through with the deal. Because it wasn't in our best interest ultimately, and it wasn't in his best interest ultimately. So that's kind of how that sort of played out. But yeah, I mean, Shark Tank was definitely a great experience. It definitely gave us the exposure.
Massive exposure.
That was in 2020, in May of 2020. So
wow.
So yeah, so that basically put us on the board.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, so I'm going to pivot, because the question I was going to ask is, did you get any advice on how to execute your strategy from anyone, or did you guys have to just figure it out yourself?
You mean from the Shark?
From Sharks, or even other mentors or other advisors? Was that something that you got help from, and how to execute?
Yeah. So, and that's another thing with startups, it's great to have an advisory team. So we do have advisors. We actually have great advisors. And then even Brad, again, the other co-founder, he has a consumer electronics background. I mean, he was a consultant for major consumer electronics companies. He worked for Toshiba and Vizio for like decades. So he definitely has that background. And so, I came in with the marketing background. So that's my sort of cup of tea. And his is more product development. So, we definitely complement each other. Our skill set.
So if you were going back and doing it all over again, what would you do differently, if anything? Or is that all just part of the journey?
It is. I think I would do the same thing. I get that question asked a lot. I mean, Amazon is one of those, like I said, it's a big gorilla. But everyone shops there, right? And ultimately, you need to be where everyone shops. You need to be where your customers are, right? That's really marketing. I mean, you've got to be where your customers are shopping. And so that's Amazon. And so, like I said, I would not do it differently. I would just always have in the back of my mind that, what, this is going to end at some point, or this is going to have to, we're going to have to pivot at some point. And so that's kind of the thinking going into it. I think, know that, if you start off with Amazon, which I think, I mean, I almost recommend anyone with a product, they should be on Amazon, especially starting off, because that's where you're going to gain a lot of awareness. Yeah, so that's my whole thinking.
Cool. So let's shift over to question number 2, and these are the skills, maybe even the mindset that you think everyone needs to have in order to be great at executing. What are your big lessons? What are your big advisements?
Yeah, so as far as skill sets, I mean, all the leadership skill sets, right? Communication is crucial. If you're not communicating with your team, then that just gets really frustrating for everyone. So
what are the complaints you get? I mean, because everybody says communication, but let's get tactical, because Do people say, I didn't understand? Do they say you weren't clear? What are the things that you hear that you have to navigate in order to communicate clearly?
If you're doing something, if you're going to be, um, I don't know, doing something with the product, say like Brad is doing something specifically with the product, he's going to change something on the
Hmm.
product,
Hmm.
right? About the product. He needs to communicate that to me, because, or if he thinks, since he's the product guy, if he thinks that, there's a certain benefit
Mm.
or a certain feature that really needs to be communicated, he needs to communicate that to me so I can communicate it out to the public.
So
You know
it's
what
about
I'm saying?
information flow. It's got to be able to not just stay in one little stack or silo. It's got to be cross-functional. It's got to be so everybody knows. And it sounds like before action is actually going. So it almost like, hey, I'm going to do this. I'm letting you know. Do you then
Right.
communicate back to him if you agree or disagree? And you have that? Do you have that? Is that part of it, or is it
Oh
less?
yeah. Definitely. We'll have a conversation about it. If he's doing something that I don't know that's going to be very important and that's going to impact what I'm doing, then yes, he needs to communicate that to me. We'll have a conversation. And that's the thing. He's like, hey, Lisa, what do you think about this? Should we do this? Kind of thing. That's how he approaches things with me.
Cool.
And so it's a great relationship.
And then in terms of communication, do you have to, is it more like verbal and letting people know? Do you have to publish it in a way that people can see it and go back to it? How do you do that?
So we use a tool called Basecamp.
Uh-huh.
There's
I
so
know it.
many, those
Yeah.
team collaboration tools. We use Basecamp. I mean, would I recommend it? Maybe starting off. There's some things that, we don't like about it, but yeah, so we use a team collaboration tool called Basecamp, and everyone that is a part of our company is on Basecamp. And then, you can create folders and stuff. So you can have conversations between just me and Brad, or you can have conversations with everyone who's doing marketing or whatever.
Yeah.
And then, yes, so it needs to be written. And he's really, really big on everything should be, and it needs to be in writing. Because of course, we've got so much stuff going on. You can't remember everything. So documenting everything is really, really critical.
And what I like about Basecamp and other tools like that is that you can go search for stuff like, oh my gosh, I remember we were talking about the meeting on January 15th, but it's not in the January 15th thread. So
Right,
let me
right,
go search for it. And oh, there it is. So
right.
it's that synchronous, asynchronous, that real time and that offline ability to communicate. So you don't always have to be in a meeting.
And it's gosh, do not rely on email. I mean, emails can be so messy trying to find, this
Yeah.
conversation or that conversation. And you can get like, this whole like 30 email thread that just is a nightmare to figure out. So yeah, you definitely need some sort of team collaboration tool.
Cool. What's the second thing you come up with in terms of everybody needs to know or do or think or whatever?
I think being able to set goals is
Mm.
important. Um, as a leader, you've got to be able to set goals. I mean, that's where the strategy comes from, right? That's where you have to have your goals first, right? What is it that you want to accomplish? And then the strategy falls from that. The strategy is your plan. How are you going to execute, right? So the goal, being able to set goals, and being able to set goals that are, you might have heard, SMART, right? Specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time bound,
Mm.
right? And setting those goals first, that's gonna help you, be actually, you're gonna be able to measure, right? Whether or not you're successful or not from those goals. So I think someone that's able to set goals is really critical. Problem solver is
Mm.
very critical. Problems are arising every single day. Um, so, you've got to be able to really kind of even take a step back sometimes, like even in our situation, and sort of kind of take yourself out of the picture for a little bit and really figure out, hey, is this, is this realistic? Is this the direction that we want to go? And so being a problem solver is very, 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 very critical. Also, a team player.
Hmm.
You can't do everything yourself. You have to be able to, work alongside with other folks. And then, hopefully their skill sets, in the case of Brad and I, their skill sets will complement your skill sets. Brad, like I said, he's definitely like, I mean, I thought I was a communicator. He's like tenfold. Because,
Most product players are all about, detail and making sure that when I say this word, it means only this thing. So that would
yeah.
make sense. I want to pull those things together because in the work that I do, I see patterns of this. So like one of the things you talk about goal setting, goal clarity from a human motivation point of or perspective is critical. If you can get people all shooting for the same goal, you'd be amazed at how well they'll just figure stuff out on their own. So you don't need all this other rigidity to get the goal accomplished if everybody has the same goal. But it's amazing how often people don't have the same goal. They have different definitions of the goal. They have competing goals. They have
Or they don't
personal
know
goals,
or
or
they
they
don't know
don't
the
know. They don't even know it at all. So then
right,
they're making up
right,
stuff. They're just
right,
literally going,
right.
well, this makes sense to me. And then they're off in their own direction, which then you get into the problem solving piece, and the problems they're solving may actually be creating obstacles to achieve the goal. Right. So they're
Exactly.
actually putting a solution in place that gets in the way of executing against a goal that we originally had. And then you add in this team player thing, and they're not communicating, back to the communication piece. And it becomes this incredibly dangerous snowball rolling down the hill. Right.
And then you've got to throw in communication because
Yeah.
someone's not communicating the goal or someone's not,
Yep.
it's
Or
just,
measure or communicating, hey, here's the metric against the goal. This is where we are in status, updates. And are we there? And is there anything we should be afraid of? Are there risks?
right,
And
right, right, right.
people hiding
Exactly.
them because they go, oh, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news. And yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yep, yep, yep. It's all there.
Wow. So
So
if you start thinking about how um other leaders, especially, and I do want to target and call out the startup players, how you build this into your DNA early, because this is a tough thing. Because when you're starting up, and I've done my own startups, not tech, but my own companies, um, it there's so much you're juggling in your head. It's easy to let plates, fall and slip out of your hand. You're like, oh God, there's another broken dish. And if there's a way for some folks out there listening, like, okay, I am exactly where you were a few years ago. What advice would you give them to make sure that they're people? Because everything we've talked about, we started with all the external stuff, but the reality is it's all the internal dynamics. It's the people stuff that gets in the way of our execution. So what advice would you have for those players?
yeah, you know, I'll be frank with you.
Hmm.
Startup life isn't for everyone. You have
Mm.
to have a certain personality. I knew that I wanted to, I knew that from like, again, I'm old. So like in my 20s, I knew that I
You
did
keep
not
saying that, and
want.
I'm going, either you've got a really good filter on or what, because there's just no way. No way.
I knew in my 20s that I did not want to work for someone for the rest of my life.
Mm.
I knew that I'm a hard worker, right? Um, I'll do anything. I will work my butt off. Um, but why should I do that for someone else? Like, why should I do that and make someone else wealthy?
Hmm. Hmm.
Right? I might as well do that for myself. So it's that sort of mindset. Like, I'm willing to work my butt off and do whatever I need to do in order to accomplish my goals, in order for me to know that, it's that feeling of, hey, I accomplished this, or hey, I made it, you know? So it's that sort of mentality
Hmm.
that you have to have.
Hmm.
And that's I knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur early on. I did not know what I wanted to do. the fact that I'm in education technology was like, I just came to that conclusion like a few years ago as I was working in this field. So I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I knew I wanted to work for myself. I knew I had the mindset. I just didn't know what I wanted to do. I thought it was going to be in the food arena.
Because
Um,
of all the experience with wine and everything else. Yeah.
yeah, and working for CPG, consumer packaged goods companies, and food, and managing multi-million dollar brands. I thought that
Mm.
was the direction. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, it's really the mindset, um, of perseverance, determination, um, willing to actually, when I was trying to figure it out myself before even venturing out on my own, I was taking classes. I was working full time, and then I was taking classes on the side to build up my skill sets because I knew, again, I wanted to do my own thing.
Yeah.
So it's really kind of like just knowing yourself and what you want to do. Think strategically. What do you want to do um, long term? Do you want to work for a company, or do you want to do your own thing? There's pros and cons to both, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Nothing is going to be like rosy, and just wonderful the whole time. You're going to have challenges no matter what. It's just a matter of what path you want to take and what are the deal breakers.
That's so I want to unpack that because I don't want anybody to miss this. There's a level of commitment you have to have as an entrepreneur. I mean, I love the phrase, are you an entrepreneur or a wantrepreneur? There's a lot of people who want to be an entrepreneur, then there's actual entrepreneurs. And if you want to be an entrepreneur, you've got to make sure there's a level of, I mean, visceral in your gut commitment to do stuff. But there's also, you've got to constantly be adjusting. You've got to be constantly making changes. And so there's a high degree of flexibility
Oh
you
yeah,
have to have, and yet it's
definitely.
anchored against the outcome. What are we trying to do? And we are going to get there. And I don't know how we're going to get up this mountain, because there's cliffs and there's waterfalls and there's, deserts and everything else, but we're going to find out a way to get to the top. And so you have to do that. And then you have to surround yourself with people who are committed, at least
Exactly.
at your inner
Exactly.
circle. And then it goes out from there. Right.
Exactly. I mean, I know, you see me a lot on LinkedIn, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
I'm I'm painting this like rosy picture of what's going on within the company. And there are a lot of great moments that
Mm-hmm.
that we've had, but there's a lot of downfall, a lot of frustration, a lot of challenges. Times where we just didn't think we were going to make it, you know. And so it's really, again, having that within your team, as well as family. Like, I've cut off a lot of people who are negative around me, um who don't believe or don't understand what
Yeah.
I'm doing,
Yeah.
and why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And so it's sometimes you just have to cut those folks off and just say, I can't deal with this negativity in my life right now. So let me just keep pushing forward and staying focused.
There's a very different mindset, and this could be a great place for us to wrap up, between being a cog in the machine or being the fuel that drives it.
Oh yeah.
And that's what you're talking about, is as a leader, we have the responsibility to not just be a cog in the machine. And yeah, there's times that we jump in and, if we have to take out the garbage, we take out the garbage. It doesn't
Yeah,
matter
yeah,
what,
yeah. Oh yeah. Oh
we'll do
yeah.
whatever it takes. But you're talking about how to be the fuel of the engine.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that is the purer the fuel, the hotter and better it burns.
Exactly. And
Wow.
it's exciting. It's exhilarating. It's refreshing, Um I have to tell you, these moments, like, even when we're in the classroom, sometimes we go into the classroom, well, actually, no, we did a session after the pandemic, but the kids that we're targeting, underserved, underrepresented communities, when we go into the classroom and we're teaching them coding on our computers, it's just like, oh my gosh, it's so refreshing and so touching. to see these kids that probably would have never even been exposed to coding to have this exposure and for them to like really like it and want more. It's
That's
like, oh,
beautiful.
yeah, it's
That's
great.
really cool. That's really cool. Lisa, our time's up. Thank you so much for being on season one. I appreciate this as a friend, and I appreciate this as a colleague. And I know there are people out there who appreciate just you sharing your story with the transparency that you just did.
Well,
Have a great
thank
day.
you so much. It was fun. I enjoyed
Good.
this. And if I can help anyone, just look me up.
I so enjoyed that conversation, especially the very end where Lisa got into how to be the fuel of execution. I'm curious, what are your biggest takeaways? And how are you going to use them? My three biggest takeaways are: your team is critical for execution. External disruptions are constant. So, how well we as humans respond to those disruptions is going to be the key to your execution. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Information needs to flow before the action is taken to avoid unnecessary disruptions. And let technology be your friend, especially when it comes to making information quickly available so that people don't need to slow down the execution. Everyone on the team must have tenacity, flexibility, and commitment. This also means that you, as the leader, need positivity because your positivity is the fuel of execution. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with at least one person and leave me a review on whatever platform you downloaded this podcast. Your feedback is invaluable to me. And Imua, onward and upward.